So it basically means that every time diesel is being burned to produce power in those areas, then the cost of that diesel has to be absorbed by all electricity consumers in Kenya uniformly. That is the only way someone in Mandera, for example, is shielded from having to pay for higher cost of power as compared to someone in Kisumu, for example. There is a concept referred to as one Kenya, one people, one tariff. It basically means if there is a user that consumes between 0 to, let's say, 30 units maximum in a billing cycle, that is every month. Now, if the applicable tariff, after including the levies, the charges, and other taxes, if the tariff is 20 shillings per unit, for example, then it means that if such a user exists in Lamu, in Kisumu, in Mandera, in Kajiado, that user must pay nothing more than 20 shillings per unit. It basically means the tariff has to be standard. We cannot have a higher tariff for someone in Wajir who is using the same number of units similar to someone who is in Tariff or in Kisumu, for example. Now, the implications is that there are places in this country that are not yet connected to the national grid. Those places are powered by standalone generators. Those generators are powered by diesel. Diesel is expensive. So it basically means that every time diesel is being burned to produce power in those areas, then the cost of that diesel has to be absorbed by all electricity consumers in Kenya uniformly. That is the only way someone in Mandera, for example, is shielded from having to pay for higher cost of power as compared to someone in Kisumu, for example. Now, this is why sometimes it is always good to ensure that we spread development uniformly across all regions, because you see, once a region has been isolated, and this has nothing to do with electricity only, even in roads, water, every essential service, that isolation of an area or that neglect of a region has a net effect on everyone. So you find that, for example, if our tariffs was to be at 30 shillings or at 20 shillings per unit, then you find that it's a bit higher because that diesel that is being burned in places that are not connected to the grid, the cost of that diesel has to be calculated and included in the tariff so that we have a uniform tariff for all of us. Now, perhaps you're wondering whether there have been any efforts in the past to try and solve this issue of high cost of power in this country. Yes, indeed, a lot of efforts have happened. In fact, in the last 10 years alone, we have had about 4 task forces, okay? About 4 parliamentary inquiries, and even a moratorium or a prohibition of issuance of new PPAs in the last 10 years only, okay? Now, one of the problems with these task forces and the inquiries that have happened in the past is that the outcome of such reports have never been told to the public. The reports were simply handed over to the people who appointed the task force, and that's it. For example, in 2017, there was such a task force, again with the intention of reducing the cost of power in the country. Let me read word for word. It says, with the publication of Gazette Notice 862 of 2017 in January 3rd, 2017, the Cabinet Secretary for Energy and Petroleum established a task force to examine power purchase agreements for independent power producers. Its task was to examine the PPAs made between the IPPs and Kenya Power and make recommendations for standardizing PPAs and ways to conduct tariff reviews in order to lessen the impact on retail tariffs. Now, the sad part with this task force is they indeed carried out the task. But the tragedy is, once the report was handed over to the Cabinet Secretary for Energy in May 31st, 2018, that was it. Nobody has ever seen that report. Well, or perhaps if you have seen it, you may let us know the contents of that task force report. Now in 2021, again, there was an attempt to address the issue of high cost of power. So a task force was constituted following a presidential directive in March 2021. Now the mandate was to undertake a comprehensive review and analysis of the terms of all PPAs entered into by Kenya Power and develop a suitable strategy for engagement with the IPPs and lenders with the sole purpose of achieving relief for electricity consumers and ensure the long-term viability and sustainability of the energy sector. Now in September 2021, the team that was carrying out the task came with a report, and the recommendation was to lower the price of power by more than 33%. Now, this was supposed to be done in two stages. So the first 15%, they said, was to target system losses, all right? And then the second phase was to target PPA contract renegotiations with the independent power producers. Now in January, there was actually progress. Consumers realized that the number of units that they were receiving were much higher with the same purchase, because the first phase of that implementation was actually achieved. So how was this drop achieved? Now, the report says that to cover for this drop, taxes, levies, and consumption fees were each reduced by about 20%, okay? And all the monthly increases to surcharges were stopped, all right? Now, the problem is this thing ran into sustainability problems, because soon the report notices this thing led to liquidity issues for Kenya Power. In fact, it says that it led to a 26.3 billion annual revenue shortfall for KPLC. Remember, this is just the first 15%, phase one. The other 17% or so was yet to be addressed, and already Kenya Power was in trouble. Now, the second phase had something to do with engaging the independent power producers with an effect of trying, if possible, to renegotiate the terms of the PPAs, right? So that if some of those terms could be adjusted, then there again we could realize some reduction in the electricity tariffs. Now, the sad part with this is that there wasn't really any much progress that was made to address the issue of having renegotiation with the independent power producers so that there is a meaningful cost reduction. I believe up to date, there is not quite a lot that has been done in that line to ensure that the cost of power is reduced. Now, there were also other issues that were noted during the 2-year investigation by the National Assembly Energy Committee, the report that was presented last year, November. One of those issues was they noticed that there was a general opaqueness in the disclosure of beneficial owners of IPPs, with majority of them listing foreign companies as shareholders. So you try to follow who really benefits from the profits, who really is the actual owner of these independent power plants, but you just end up in circles because the foreign companies or foreign entities have been listed there, and sometimes the jurisdictions are not really cooperative to help Kenya try to understand the faces behind those companies. So that's some of the issues that came about. The report also noticed that since we lack approved land value index to help us in issues of compensation, it then means that when you're doing the compulsory acquisition of land, so many issues come about. One of the issues, of course, is delays in construction, court cases. Another issue is the cost of acquiring those land or pieces of parcels of land become expensive because it's almost like it's not regulated. There's no standard document that shows or directs the compensation levels that need to be issued to the affected landowners for resettlement purposes. The other issue that the report also mentioned is they noticed that the procurement of the IPPs was mad or was full of irregularities, and in most instances it was not competitive. Every time competition lacks, there's a high chance that you are not getting value for money. In South Africa, for example, they established an IPP office in 2010. That office is ensuring that independent power producers are brought on board after a competitive process to ensure that costs are fair and that even the eventual tariff that the users of electricity have to part with are not exorbitant to the taxpayer or to the consumers. Now, it may look like independent power producers are not a favorable avenue to be used for power production, for example. Well, that is not always the case. There are benefits that come with tapping or going the direction of independent power producers. So some of those advantages that the report highlighted are, remember, if you are broke or if you do not have a lot of cash to do so many things. Government is giant. They want to do roads, they want to do hospitals, they want to do education, handle a few bursaries here and there. They may not have money, again, to put up power plant now or tomorrow or in 2 years. So the advantage of going through the independent power producers is that they give you that space of bringing in the money to set up their power plants, so that later, of course, they can recoup their investment through tariff. So such scenarios create room for government in the budget. When the budget is really constrained, the independent power producers come in handy. Now, the second thing that most independent power producers bring is something about efficiency and, of course, value for money. Because these guys, they also bring in some innovation, right? Remember, that is their business. That's what they are doing on a day-to-day basis. So there's a high chance that because they have practiced it so many times, there's innovation. And where there's innovation, costs will go down. And where costs go down, maximum returns. Now, the third benefit of using independent power producers is, of course, technology. They are much advanced as compared to the public sector. And technological advancement brings in diversity. It gives you room to have various technologies for power generation, wind, solar, hydro, name it. All that complement the grid because various technologies are used to meet various power requirements throughout the day. Finally, bringing on board independent power producers also allow for the local citizen to borrow from the expertise of the foreigners that are coming to do the construction, the design, the operation, and the maintenance of the power plants. Now, on the flip side, if not well monitored, one of the problems with independent power producers is tariffs can be very costly, especially if optimization is overlooked, especially if the PPA is not well drafted, and especially if the capex or the various inputs to the capital are not regulated. So you may end up with a beautiful power plant, but very costly during the time of operations for the consumers of electricity. The second disadvantage of independent power producers is because most of them tend to be foreign in nature, it means their monies come from abroad. When their monies come from abroad, remember the currency for signing the PPAs will most likely tend to be foreign currency, the dollars, the euros, the rest, etc. That exposes us to something called foreign exchange risks, and we had highlighted this in the previous episode, episode 4. You can go and check the ramifications of that. Now, because sometimes a letter of support or guarantees from government is needed, this increases government's contingent liabilities. Now, contingent liabilities is a potential financial obligation that may arise depending on an outcome of some future uncertain event. For example, if you have a pending lawsuit, that is a contingent liability, because if the case goes against you and you're expected to pay, you must meet that cost. Another contingent liability example is product warranty. Now, for government, when you're promising somebody that if, for example, the expressway revenue hits certain levels that make the project no longer sustainable, then the government will chip in from the tax to meet the shortfall. Those kind of letters of support or guarantees increases the contingent liabilities, and we may reach the threshold, meaning we may find ourselves in a scenario where we cannot develop other projects. Yes, finally, some independent power producers their owners come from places that are called tax havens, right? So it basically places our regulators in a scenario where we cannot scrutinize or verify the financial transactions of the independent power producers. So now we are at the tail end. We have understood what are causing us the high cost of power in Kenya. And perhaps you think that all is lost. No. The beauty of what you have done is we have understood what the problem is. Now, in the next episode, we will start going through what are the solutions. What are the immediate steps that if we take now, we will start seeing the cost of power coming down. What are the steps that if we take in years to come in our next projects will also again give us relief in our tariffs? That is going to be our next episode. Now, if you believe there could be other causes or other issues that are contributing to the high cost of power, and we have forgotten or we have not highlighted them, please let me know so that we can also comprehensively study them as we move to the next phase of now what? We have the problem. What is the solution? Until then, my friend,